everybody, welcome back. It's Capper, and this is the Medical Cases Podcast, and we have a very exciting show for you today. We are starting with the first of many interviews with physicians who have led unique and non-clinical careers. Today we have Dr. Jeremy Tucker. He is a practicing emergency medicine physician. He is the co-founder of a company named Medssenger and on the board of directors for a company called Fruit Street. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the interview. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
All right, so here we have with us Dr. Tucker. Dr. Tucker, how long have you been in emergency medicine?
It's 2003, so 14 years.
14 years, okay. Well, excellent to have you on the show. I know you have experience in more than just emergency medicine. If you can give us a brief history of all the things that you're involved in.
Well, I'm currently emergency physician with U.S. Acute Care Solutions. I'm boarded in internal medicine and emergency medicine. I've been a medical director and regional director and done quality and safety and risk, and so I wear a lot of hats within my organization, but also do some things outside of my organization. So I like tech and I like solving problems using technology. So co-founded a startup called Medssenger, which does structured messaging, cross-organizational to coordinate care of patients. And then I'm involved in Fruit Street Health, which is a telemedicine program for wellness, so lifestyle diseases, obesity, and we have a number of clinical trials pending, as well as customers using our product right now. And then I have a passion for drones just because I got into flying them on my own. It's pretty fun, enjoyable. If you haven't tried it, you should. But secondary, looking for healthcare solutions and drones, which a number of companies are doing that currently, and I've talked to a number of people, and I write about drones in healthcare as well, as that's a very new area. And then there's other things in technology. Artificial intelligence is going to be very big as well, and so I kind of follow that as well.
Okay, so it sounds like a lot of different areas of interest, and like you said, a lot of different hats. Tell me a little bit about how you started in medicine and what brought you towards the business side of things, co-founding this company, Medssenger, and ending up being on the board of directors for Fruit Street.
Yeah, started early during residency. A couple friends of mine founded a company that no longer exists, but we were doing staffing for MRI centers during residency. So I started with a kind of a business sense very early on, and we staffed 5 or 6 different MRI centers for gadolinium infusions, and employed residents to serve in that role. And so we had a little mini staffing company during residency, and then I joined MEP Health, which last year merged into U.S. Acute Care Solutions, but MEP Health in Maryland, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. We were a young and growing company when I joined, so we had to grow the company, and so you kind of learn as you go, and we do a lot of mentoring and business training along the way to grow this business. And last year we joined with a number of other physician-owned groups to form U.S. Acute Care. So I kind of picked it up along the way, and it's always been kind of a passion of mine. And then, of course, the technology side of it has always been interesting since I had my first Commodore 64 back in the 80s. And so I've always enjoyed technology. And so I kind of leveraged that to and relationships I've had from conferences and people I've met along the way to kind of get involved in some of these other companies that I now co-founded and assist with on the board. So, okay.
So, do you have a tech background? Is it a formal tech background?
No, not at all. So, the message to ER physicians is these tech companies are yearning for medical input, medical knowledge. They're developing these solutions, and a lot of people developing these solutions are people who have access to the healthcare system. One of my co-founders, he had a medical issue, and he had to go to the doctor a number of times, and he thought, this is crazy. They're asking me to carry my chart, my records over to my other appointment. And then, he came from a software background, and in this day and age, it's ridiculous. This should be electronic. And so there are people out there that have this perspective on healthcare that it's kind of ancient and antiquated compared to some other industries, and they want to fix it. And they need the physician input. And so if you're a physician with a passion for this, you learn the knowledge along the way, doing it and or reading and or, there's a number of ways to get knowledge, but you don't have to be a coder to do this kind of stuff, to work in the software industry. So I would encourage anyone, emergency physician, any physician, any specialty, if you have a passion for this kind of stuff, just reach out, just talk to someone, leverage your contacts and get involved. And there's certainly a place for physicians to do this kind of work.
Yeah, excellent. I know kind of in the startup community, there tends to be a little bit of a stigma against what they call the non-tech founder or the non-tech co-founder, kind of starting these tech startups and tech companies without a formalized background in at least computer science. But in your experience, you find that having the medical background and having a web of contacts, if you will, that you can kind of leverage and utilize really helped you out.
Yeah, and I think, there's not everyone's going to be a co-founder. That's probably, again, a little unusual. However, there are many roles for physician advisors, investor advisors, serving on the board, just making yourself available, chief medical officer. There are a number of different roles within these organizations where you can contribute as a member of the team, as an advisor, as an investor. And so there's many ways to get involved, even if you're not a co-founder.
Okay. And so tell me a little bit about what led you to develop this platform, Medssenger, and how that all started.
Well, I met with two other co-founders. One is George Calvert, and he was a senior vice president with Blackboard, which is the educational software company. And he had an exit from that company and has devoted his last 2 years to developing a software platform after he and Nathan Lee is the other co-founder. They approached me and said, look, we need this is our solution we have. And this is a Baltimore-based company and near where I live. And so I met those guys and heard their solution and said, yeah, I mean, we need to – I see a great need for this in the market. We've all seen emergency medicine where we tell someone to do something as we discharge them, go follow up with this doctor, and that's it. It's all in the patient's lap, right? And how many times do they bounce back to the ER because they couldn't access that, or they wouldn't do it, or they couldn't do it, whether it's financial, transportation, just the know-how. Healthcare literacy is an issue that also needs to be solved. That's a big task, but some people just don't do it because they just don't have the knowledge to be able to do that. So instead of just lobbing it over the fence and saying, here, go do this, we use the software to coordinate that. So it's a handoff to the physician, whether it's their primary care physician, whether it's a on-call physician. Here's a hot handoff. Here's a message, and it can integrate with the EMR, so it can send over the information. And this it can be routed to the scheduler. It doesn't have to go to the physician and bother him. Last thing we want is more interruptions as a physician. So me being involved with the group is able to say, hey, let's make this physician friendly, or they're not going to use it. It has to be smart and intelligent, and route the messages and the tasks where they need to go. So if it's a stress test request for a patient that needs a stress test, after you do a heart score and 2 troponins, and you don't want to just say, okay, call the cardiologist, which might happen in a week or two when they get around to it, it's going to send the message, right, in a HIPAA-compliant fashion, where someone can act on that message and call the patient and pull them in instead of relying on the patient to do what's next. And so we believe it's going to help reduce readmissions by, again, instead of lobbying it over the fence and putting it all on the patient responsibility to get that next step, is to drive that transition of care. So,
yeah, that's good. I know one of the follow-up instructions for the old chest pain, go get your stress test within 72 hours, and you say a quick prayer before the patient leaves that they'll actually do it.
Yeah. And if you're in a state like Maryland, which has contributory negligence clauses, many states don't, I mean, you can at least say, well, I told them to do it, they didn't do it. There's some of the responsibilities on them, but not all states have those kind of clauses. And so, you really hope they do the right thing, but, if you don't help them out, it's not going to happen in 72 hours. We all know that. And they bounce back to our ER a week later with chest pain. And did you get your stress test? No, I didn't even call yet. So we see that all the time. That problem needs to be solved.
Yeah.
this can solve that plus many other similar transition of care issues.
Yeah, I think it's important to state that formally, that when going about this process of developing a new startup or coming up with an idea, it's not always the idea that matters, but it's attacking the problem. So you start with the problem first. Where is the need? Where is the pain point? Or where is the friction in a procedure, in a transaction, in anything that you do daily? And then you come up with a solution after that.
Yeah, so the reasons I'll choose to get involved in a company or as an advisor or co-founder is this a compelling solution? And I know the problem exists, right? I'm in emergency medicine. I see it every day. So the problem. That's another thing I'll tell physicians that are listening is that, you see problems every day that you just frustrate the heck out of you during your practice, whether they're bottlenecks or barriers to get what you want done. If you have an idea or a solution, start talking to people, because there are people out that want to solve the same problem. So if there's there's a problem and I see someone with a compelling solution, if you're passionate about it, join, get involved, and start working on solving that problem. And there are several barriers. Startups are not easy work, but it's fun. It's fun and interesting.
Yeah. So talking about barriers to being involved in a startup, tell me about one of the harder times that you've had in the business world, and maybe one of the harder times that you've had in medicine.
Yeah, I think from startups, one of the biggest challenges is getting that first pilot. You have a solution to a problem that you find is compelling, and everyone you talk to is like, yeah, that sounds awesome. Let me know when what your results are. Let me know when you pilot it, or let me know. You got to get that first person, and so you just have to contact so many people. Healthcare is not an early adopter as an industry, right? Hospital administrators are not quick to jump on board with these kind of solutions. So you have to find the right people. So I think getting a pilot is a big challenge, and of course, funding is also a challenge. I think once you get a pilot and have some good results, funding gets easier. So we're starting a pilot right now with the healthcare system, and for a very simple solution, just kind of as a pre-beta to get some feedback on the product. But so we have solutions for that. We've achieved that goal, but it's tough.
Yeah, is that with Medssenger that you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Medssenger. With Fruit Street, they already have a number of customers, including enterprise clients that are using and scaling up pretty quick when they realize it really does well to solve their problems. A lot of people in Fruit Street, to briefly mention that's a telemedicine platform that just focuses on lifestyle diseases, so obesity, weight loss, and it's not only used by physicians, obesity clinics and weight loss clinics, but it's used by dietitians and other professionals that are trying to keep people healthy, right? And so it can integrate with devices such as scales and wearable devices as well. But it's a telehealth solution that you can schedule your appointments right on there and have an interaction with your patient to achieve goals of weight loss, increase exercise, basically, reduce the great cost of these chronic diseases. So I think it's tackling things at the very, very beginning stages, or trying to improve the overall health of a patient.
Yeah, Fruit Street, talking about funding a little bit, I know they had a fairly interesting crowdfunding campaign. They have a group of physicians. It's over 60 to 100, I believe, physicians that have invested in the company. Can you talk a little bit about the decision to do this crowdsourcing as opposed to going the VC route?
Yeah, it's a very interesting model. It is. So look at it this way. They have, between 60 and 100 physician advisors. I lose track because they add some every month from all specialties, right? I'm emergency medicine. There are people for cardiology, and they're not all lifestyle disease, obesity medicine physicians. And then here you have evangelists who are looking for ways to deploy or sell the product into the systems that they're in. They're also providing advice and feedback on the product. They're also leveraging their contacts in the healthcare world. Not only do you have investors, but you have advisors who can actually improve the product. So I think it's very powerful than just having one or two very large VC investors involved. I think at some point in time, that VC investor will follow. We're not really even pursuing that at this point in time. It hasn't been pursued yet because we've been so successful with physician investors. They've used basically social media campaigns. So if you're a physician listening to this, you probably you look in your LinkedIn feeds and you've probably received some kind of solicitation, I'll say, at least to look at Fruit Street as a potential investment or become an advisor. So.
Yeah, so it's really exciting what we've seen now with the passage of the Jobs Act. That was 2012, the Jumpstart Our Business Startups Act, where we're seeing companies like Fruit Street, these startup companies that instead of going the typical VC route, they're going for crowdsourcing. And in the case of Fruit Street here, you've got all these physicians that are investing in the company. So you're getting the funding, but then you're also getting this group of investors who are also a valuable resource in that they can give feedback on the company that they are now a part of and that they now have invested in. It's really neat stuff.
Yeah, and there's still a lot of due diligence, right, by these docs, because docs are also skeptical people, right? And so there's a lot of conversations and a lot of meetings to talk to these physicians about Fruit Street once they signal an interest in the platform. But it's been very successful.
Yeah, that's awesome. So with Fruit Street, you are a member of the board of directors?
Correct.
How did they approach you to be a member of the board? And tell me a little bit more about what that actually entails. Does that mean that you have ownership of the company or you act solely in an advisory role?
Yeah, I mean, so there's different ways to become involved. I mean, the typical physician that wants to become involved will after due diligence deciding to invest, will invest an amount of money. I think pretty typical is $25,000 to $50,000, although some are much larger than that. I was a larger investor, and with my background in what I've done before in emergency medicine and healthcare, as well as Medssenger, Lawrence, the CEO, is interested in adding me to the board. So I guess that's the reason. And on the board, we make a lot of decisions as far as the direction of the company, and so right now it's a smaller board. We have 5 members.
Yeah, interesting. So it sounds like your prior experiences really, have led you to have this skill set and this knowledge base that makes you a valuable member of the board, kind of helping direct this company. I know that Fruit Street, they have several different partnerships, kind of partnering with Fitbit. I know they're getting involved in the wearable sphere, University of Michigan, and then they also coupled with a new company, VC. Is that what it is?
So VC is owned part of Fruit Street, and VC is a platform. VC is a well-known telemedicine company based in San Jose. VC does the telemedicine to the International Space Station. Is what you hear the most in the website, their claim to fame. It's a very low bandwidth solution, so you don't have to worry about whether the hospital or even if you're out in the field somewhere whether you have a robust signal or not. It can work on, I believe, it can work on 3G as well. So so VC is the platform for a number of different telehealth companies, and they provide the telehealth solution for us.
And talking about partnerships, there always comes this slight bit of caution whenever you hear founders discuss partnerships they've been in. It always kind of goes, well, we're partnering and we're really excited, but there's also stories of partnerships that you invest too strongly in another company, or you lean on them too much, and there can be risks there. Were there any discussions as far as the risks and benefits of formally partnering with these companies?
Yeah, I mean, right now we have a number of trials going on, like you mentioned, the University of Michigan pediatric obesity trial, a number of others that we're talking to now that are interested in. Some of the funding from this research comes from us, and so how much do you want to invest in research as a company is a debate. But so there's a risk in that, right? And there's always risk that you're not going to get the desired results out of the study. So there's some risk there. If you're a physician considering investing, investing in startups is not for the faint of heart. It's not like investing in a 401k or mutual fund or exchange traded fund. I mean, there's significant risk. I think the statistics are 1 in 10 startups is successful. So you got to look at the stage that it's in. You got to look at your risk tolerance yourself, kind of where you're at in your career before you make a decision, and then how much do you want to invest. So it's certainly risk in investing. I've done my math in my head and what I can afford to invest, and taken done the risk calculation in my head, but it's still a long road to get to where it's going to pay off. It's not a liquid investment. You can't go get your money back right away, and it may take 3 to 5 years, sometimes even longer than that, to really get a payoff. So you got to look at the time horizon when you're making these decisions as well.
So if you had to pick one thing that you're the most proud of, whether it be in medicine or as being an entrepreneur, what are you most proud of?
I still think it comes back to the clinical practice of emergency medicine. If all this else goes away, right? I mean, that's what I chose, years ago, is to do emergency medicine. And I haven't given up the clinical practice of medicine because I still enjoy being at the bedside taking care of patients. And so, like a lot of you listeners, I mean, there's a dozen of stories that stand out in your mind over 10 or 20 years of a career that really stick with you, right? And the way you really, we touch lives in ways we don't realize, very, very minor things that we maybe not even, enter our mind, but the ones that we really recognize as doing some good for people really stand out. And I think those stories are what I'm most proud of, and all of us have those stories.
Yeah, we really do. We do this day in and day out, and sometimes we can forget how big of an impact we have, but in emergency medicine, we really do good things. Sometimes it's interspersed with a little bit of trials and maybe not making a huge difference, but there are definite times where we make a difference in the lives of patients, for sure. Any specific cases that you can remember that have really stuck with you, or any lessons you've learned in the practice of medicine?
Yeah, I guess one to be brief. It really stood out was not even any medical care I provided, but it was we solved problems, right? ER physicians are great at solving problems. And a patient's wife calls the ER as she's coming in, stating, "Look, my husband's been told he's got a liver waiting for him. He's on the transplant list. Well, I live about an hour and a half from DC, in rush hour traffic, maybe 2, and he's got to get to DC." And I'm about, a little ways away, and they're driving. And he said he's got an hour left on his liver. I mean, he's got to get there. And I know it's not going to happen by car, right? And she's saying, "I'm driving him to your hospital." I'm like, what am I going to do, right? Even to get a helicopter from the receiving hospital, 2 ways is going to be an hour. Come down to us, pick him up, and go back. And so he comes in. I'm like, okay, we're going to try to solve this problem. So we threw a line in him. I'm calling the state police helicopter because they're stationed down here in my county, and I can get that, one way in 25 minutes. I can be to my hospital in 5. And so we got this guy up there with like minutes to spare on his liver, and I didn't do anything medical to him. I just arranged transportation for the guy who did have a medical issue. And, 6 months later, I got a letter back from him. I almost, didn't know the outcome, And the guy was really appreciative, obviously, that he waited so long for this liver. It may have been his last chance to get one. It was a match, and so that made you feel real good. And we're problem solvers, and it's not even always about the medical care we provide, but some of the other things we provide for the patient.
Yeah, for sure. Any specific advice that you'd have for doctors that are either thinking of being involved in entrepreneurship or doctors that are already involved? Yeah,
I would be very active on what you're doing, content, generation for, you really got to develop your contacts because, it's really strange how some contact that you just made that ends up turning into a really fruitful relationship. So I'm very active on LinkedIn, and a number of my opportunities have come through there, some of the contacts, and then go to conferences. We've all been to the kind of conferences that are not so great, and there's some conferences that are just phenomenal. And some of them are outside of, healthcare, or they're more into technology side. So if you have an interest in technology, look for the ones that intersect technology and healthcare together, and you can make some great contacts and share your ideas and form relationships that go beyond. And once you do that, you're starting to get phone calls from other company CEOs that say, well, let me see how our solution might work with your solution if we put things together. So a lot of conversations happen from those things. So really get out there and have these conversations.
Yeah, that's really great advice. And I mean, that's partially the reason behind my podcast as well, is that, I get to do interviews like this and listen to other people's stories and try to learn from every single person that I interact with, same way that I do with medicine. Now, have you had any experiences in business that are, more negative? I know that, business is a different industry from medicine, and there is sometimes this stigma that, business may be more cutthroat, or, that people involved in business, that they're not out there to help people, that they're more out there for the money. This isn't something that I've found to be true. I think that a lot of times in business, we're trying to do what's best for, our client or for the people that we're working with, so that all parties involved can benefit. Do you have any comments on that?
What I see from the people I talk to, again, with other startups that want to talk, whether we're at a conference or we're doing a video conference call because we met at a conference, to see what your solution looks like, what our solution looks like. I see a lot of collaboration. I see a lot of people trying to solve similar problems. There's multiple people out there trying to solve these problems. Why? Because it's an important problem to provide better care and to reduce cost. So what I see is people wanting to solve problems. And I don't see it as cutthroat. Not that I've experienced this point. I see a lot of people who are really in it for good. Fruit Street, for example, is incorporated as a public benefit corporation, which just allows it to, in its charter, really talk about trying to do good for the community or for its market. And so I found that unique. I think people really want to do good for the community and for their patients, and so that's why I've gone into it. I encourage people to go into it with the same mindset as you're not going into it to make a bunch of money. Matter of fact, you may not make any money, you may lose money, but you're contributing to ideas and solutions that are going to help people.
Yeah, I like that a real lot. Very positive and a great attitude to have, and an excellent way to wrap up on the show. Thank you so much for sharing all of your experiences with us and all your advice. It was excellent to have you on.
You're welcome, anytime.
And that's it for the interview today. I hope you all enjoyed hearing Dr. Tucker's unique experience, and we have many more episodes to come. Stay tuned, because I'm starting a series on interviews with doctors who have practiced all around the world in unique situations. This includes tactical medicine, wilderness medicine, doctors involved in business and entrepreneurship, as well as the administrative side of things. Next week we have a doctor who was the private physician for the Sultan of Oman. This was while the Sultan was involved in his cross-country tours where he would visit the people of the country. So lots of interesting stuff to come. Please stay tuned, and as always, thank you very much for listening to the Medical Cases Podcast. And last little thing, today's intro and outro music was brought to you by my favorite YouTube producer, Syndrome. Go ahead and check him out on YouTube if you want to hear some pretty great beats. And that's it for today. Have a good one. Capper out.